This is episode 32 with Scott Allan.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
Aloha, Men of Abundance. It is Monday and we are back with another week of amazing guests, and we start off the week today with Scott Allan, and Scott is an amazing abundant leader living in Japan. We're going to talk today with Scott about how and why he moved to Japan 20 years ago. Now, I do have to say, I don't know if it's because Scott is in Japan or maybe Skype was just having some issues that day, as I have in the past, but part of the conversation, there's a lot of static. I cleaned it up as best as I could, but you can still hear the conversation. I hope it's not too distracting. In either case, you still get a lot of very valuable content out of this episode. And I have a very exciting announcement that I want to make, and that is, if you haven't noticed already, my website, menofabundance.com, has had a major facelift. It looks completely different, and I have to thank Daniel over at Podcast Websites for doing all of the artwork and putting in all the work that he has to make this site as amazing as it is. The other thing I want to point out is that the iTunes logo is going to change. So for right now, you may still see the man running on the beach with the black lettering saying Men of Abundance. But if you go to menofabundance.com and you look at the new logo that's on that site, that's basically going to be the same logo that you'll see on iTunes and Stitcher, as well as any other platforms that you might be listening to Men of Abundance on. I wanted to point that out to you so that when you go looking for Men of Abundance in your podcast player, you'll know to look for the new logo. And if you're as excited as these new changes as I am, make sure you share Men of Abundance with everybody in your community. As you know, the more you share, the more people can get in on all of this valuable information and possibly change somebody's life. All right, let me introduce you to Scott. Scott Allan is an author that focuses on changing old routines, behaviors, and overcoming all levels of self-defeating behavior. This is definitely within the abundant mentality. He believes that successful living is a series of small actions taken consistently on a daily basis in order to build a quality, rich lifestyle. As I already mentioned, Scott resides in Western Japan, where he spends most of his time traveling, writing, and counting the many gratitudes of life. He is the author of Empower Your Thoughts, Rejection, Reset, and several other best-selling books. With a deep passion for teaching, building life skills, and inspiring others to take charge of their lives, he is committed to a path of constant and never-ending self-improvement. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Absolutely. Where are you at in the world?
Well, I'm located in Okayama City, which is in Japan. I'm about 30 minutes from Hiroshima, and I guess I'm between Hiroshima and Osaka City.
Nice. I have been to Japan. I love Tokyo. I've been mostly down around the Camp Zama area. I'm not sure what town is down around there, around Camp Zama. But we would take a train right outside the back gate there of Camp Zama, and I think about an hour and a half or so we'd be in Tokyo.
Okay, yeah, sure. I haven't heard of the place, but there's lots of little towns and cities you can really get lost once you get on a train. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely, big place, a lot of fun, absolutely a lot of fun. So how did you end up down there? I'm sure we're going to get into that a little bit. Well, as a matter of fact, let's do this. I talked a little bit about you. I spoke a little bit about your bio and what you've been up to, just very, very briefly. But I want to hear your story from you. So let's get a little bit personal.
Okay, sure. I'll try to keep it brief, but I may not. So. Let's see. Yeah, I've been here almost, I guess, about 20 years. And how I got here actually was, I'm from Canada, by the way. I came from the East Coast, but I was living in Vancouver at the time. And I was actually working as an electrical engineer. And things are going okay. And suddenly, one day, I found myself without a job. I lost my job. And that same week, I guess I lost my girlfriend too. So I was having a bad week, you could say.
I guess.
Yeah. And anyway, what happened is, basically, I think I had two choices. I could go and get another job, which I actually didn't want to do because the job I was working in, I just wasn't for me. I just reached that point where I knew, like, I'd gone as far as I could go. I wanted to try something different, but I wasn't sure what it was. And I didn't really want to get into another relationship at the time either. So at the time I had kind of a mentor, coach, and we sat down and he just basically said to me, look, you have two choices. You can do what you've always done and, just carry on that way, or you can do something completely different, he said. And that was it. That was our conversation. And I decided at the time that I was going to do something completely different. Didn't know what it was at the time. So anyway, but a week later, got this package in the mail from my father, and opened up, and it was a book. And at the time, I do a lot of reading. I've always been a big reader. And it was a book from Anthony Robbins. And you've probably heard of him, Anthony Robbins, and
Absolutely.
the book was Awaken the Giant. And I thought, wow, okay, so I'm unemployed now, I've got lots of time, so I'll give this book a read. And I read it within 2 days. It's a big book, it's a lot of meat in there, and I read it within 2 days, and I just thought, wow, this is great. And I went through and I started doing the section on writing out your goals and stuff and making a life plan. And I'd never done that thing. I'd never done that before. So, within a week, I had this massive bucket list of at the time I didn't call it a bucket list. I think it was 100 things I wanted to do before I died, and just all these things I wanted to do that I'd never thought of before, walking the Great Wall of China and visiting Australia, and actually one of them was coming to Japan and traveling around. And because before that I'd never been anywhere. I was just working and I guess hanging out on the weekends with friends and that kind of thing. So anyway, I had all these goals written out. I lived in this small apartment, and I used to have these 1980s rock posters hanging on the walls and stuff, and I tore all those down and I put up my goals. I had positive quotes everywhere, and I just turned everything into this one focus where I wanted to just move. I just wanted to leave and go traveling, and anyway, basically there were three things that came up when I did this. Wrote out my I guess life plan and my goals, and one of them was I wanted to travel. The second one was I wanted to write a book, because I'd always been into reading. I loved loved books and stuff, but and I used to do a lot of writing when I was a kid, actually, and the third thing is I wanted to build more freedom into my life. And anyway, 6 months later, I found myself on a plane coming to Japan. I'd sold everything I had, and when I say everything I had, I had a bed, a used car, and a comic collection. So, and that was it. I'd actually found a job before I came here. So a friend of mine suggested, you should try teaching English, and you could, get a job there and travel around. I thought, oh, that's a good idea. So I did. I found a job actually before I came here, and I was just going to stay for a year, and ended up staying for almost 20 now. So, and I did do a lot of traveling. I don't do as much now because I have a family and stuff, but I still get away every now and then. And on my bucket list, I accomplished a lot of things on it. There's still a lot more to do, but anyway, that's how I came here. So
That's pretty impressive. So you might have mentioned this already, but did you speak Japanese at all before you decided to go there?
That's a good question. So actually, no, I didn't know a thing. I could barely say konnichiwa when I got on the plane. So I did spend a little bit of time before I came here. I did have, actually did have some prep time. And I think I bought one of those, language books you can get at the bookstore, and I was practicing with that. But when I got here, it was just it was a whole different experience, and I'd never studied a foreign language before either, So when I got here, that was another great thing. I just dove right into that, and took up private lessons, and within 6 months, I was having conversations with people, and it was just really great. Like everything was just like such a new experience, and I knew, like, when I first got here, I thought, like, what have I done? I've given up my life and in my home country, and I'll never get back there, and but no, after 6 months, it was like it was like the best thing I'd ever done, and I never wanted to go back because I was leading this great life now overseas, and people back home are asking me, what's it like over there, and wow. So anyway, yeah, so learning the language too was a really big challenge, but I think it really helped me to grow in a lot of ways. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that you just jumped up and left, and immersion is by far the best way to learn a culture, to learn a language. That's how I learned Spanish. I took Spanish in high school, and quite frankly, I think I may have passed with a D, and that was only because there was sympathy for me or something. Even though I grew up in a Hispanic neighborhood, I just didn't learn Spanish until I got to South and Central America and spent a lot of time mostly with the kids in Bolivia and Chile and other countries, and learned Spanish through immersion, basically just by doing it, because I basically had to. And then to learn the culture and to get out there and live with them is just amazing. I commend you for that. I like Japan. I really enjoy Japan. I want to get my wife and family out there as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's a very cool place. It's and like when I came here, it was very surreal because I came here in 1998. I think I was maybe 27 years old at the time, 28, and they still weren't used to seeing a lot of people from overseas. So you get a lot of stares and stuff, and these looks of amazement, like, wow, there's one of those people from another country, and it was kind of like you kind of like you do feel a little different, of course, but over time that gradually changed, and now like it's you don't get that anymore, but it's great for tourists. Like they're really promoting the tourism, and the 2020 games are coming up in Tokyo, and so there's lots going on, and it's like if you visit a city like Tokyo and Osaka, you're just like overwhelmed by all the stuff you can see and do. So yeah, definitely come on over, we'll hang out for a while.
Oh, that'd be great. And you got over there in a time long before, or shortly before anyway, the internet was mainstream. So, anybody who's thinking about traveling today to such a place or someplace you've never been, even if it's another state you've never been, you can do multitude of research about the environment and about the area and the climate and, financial climate, weather-wise, everything before you even go. You had no prep whatsoever as far as that's concerned, other than what books you could get from a bookstore or a library, right?
No, that's a really good point, actually, and that's true. In fact, I still tell people sometimes, this is when you're getting a bit older, but you say, yeah, I remember back in the day when I didn't have internet, and we were writing letters by hand, and but no, that's right. I think I came here with like this big book from, I think it was like the Lonely Planet Guide or something, and it was just a massive book that was probably the heaviest thing in my backpack, but yeah, so that's definitely, you have that advantage too,
So you mentioned a little bit of some of your heartache and kick in the gut moments, but is that basically what got you to the point to where you decided you just wanted to up and move to Japan, or was there something else?
No, I would say that was it, but it was actually a bit deeper than that too. I've had a few of these moments in my life, actually. That was one of them. But the kick in the gut moment came, like, it wasn't just like losing a job or losing a girlfriend, but it was, I knew inside that it was time to change something. And until I was actually put in a position where I had to do it, like, I didn't take action, and I think like a lot of the changes that I've, had in my life where I moved somewhere or started something new, it was like, it's like, I have to do this thing, or, I'm just going to keep getting the same results again and again. So yeah, so it was like, it's basically like, it's like I had a choice in the moment where, either I go forward with an action, or I just do what I've always done, and I'm going to keep getting what I've always gotten, which is what I didn't want, right? So yeah, but I mean, I think, yeah, like on a deeper level, it's like I knew I was ready to change, but until something happened, I wasn't going to do anything about it. Because even before, say, losing a job's not a big deal. You can always get another job. But the fact is that I actually saw this as an opportunity. And until someone had pointed it out to me, they're like, look, you've been talking for years about changing. It's like, why don't you do it now? I mean, you're still single. You don't have any ties to here, really. Just you can do it. So, and those kick in the gut moments are, I think they can happen anytime. I mean, I think I was listening to a podcast a couple weeks ago, Michael Hyatt, and I think in the podcast he said, everyone is going to undergo a dramatic change every 10 years. So, and I was listening to that, I thought, oh, that's an interesting point. So, maybe like every 10 years, such an opportunity, it exists. And sometimes, we get so immersed into our lives that I think we're craving change. But when the opportunity comes, we're so busy doing what we're doing that we miss it, So I think you have to have some personal awareness of what's going on around you, and if you see an opportunity where you're feeling dissatisfied, or you're craving something that you want to do but you're not doing it, it could be that you're seeking that, I guess, that kick in the gut moment, and it may not just come up and slap you in the face, kind of, so to speak. It's something that sometimes you have to create it, right? So I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, that makes perfect sense. And one thing that I want to touch on that I think will resonate with men of abundance is that when you lost your job, it wasn't the end of the world, and that's the way you felt at the time. But a lot of guys define themselves by their vocation. And I come from a background of military, and definitely, without a doubt, soldiers and military members, veterans, they definitely define themselves by that job, especially infantrymen and those that are in that vocation. And then they kind of go into this depression mode because they're like, well, hell, that's all I know. That's the only thing I know how to do. All I've ever done is I drove a bulldozer, on a construction site, and then I got injured, and now I can't do that anymore. And then they go into this depression mode. Whereas you bring up a very good point in that you just redefined yourself. You just completely made a very drastic change in many people's minds, but it probably made more sense to you than it would most. But the bottom line is, the point is you realize that your vocation didn't define you. And you losing your job, in hindsight, obviously, was a blessing, but you can recover from that. And the way that you do that, men of abundance, in my mind, anyways, as I always say, is to constantly be exposing yourself to other environments, to other people, to other circles. And when or if something like that drastically changes in your life, and you have that kick in the gut moment, it won't be so hard for you to transition, and it might even be the better thing for you. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, for sure. The first time that I took that leap of faith, there was a lot of fear. It's like you really find out what you're made of, and like you said, a lot of men really, yeah. I mean, we look at our jobs as it defines us. This is, when someone asks you. People always ask you, hey, what do you do? They don't ask you, hey, who are you? What are you all about? They always ask you, men will always ask each other, what do you do? And that means I'm an engineer, or I'm a police officer, so we really define ourselves by our vocation. I totally agree with that. But the thing about that is that, you can change your vocation, of course, right? And I think that it's not our vocation does define us to a certain degree, but I think that it's when you can choose the vocation that you really want, I think that's when you can take your life to the next level. For example, I was an electrical engineer for quite a few years, but to be honest with you, I just fell into that job because at the time I had to go to school to get trained so I could get a job, because back in those days I think that's still true for a lot of people, but they finish high school or whatever, and they're like, well, what am I going to do now? And we don't have a lot of direction. It's like, oh, I'll go to university or college, and I'll take this course, and I'll get a job, and then that will define me. And then I find like, I did that, and I think I tried to build my life around that. Instead of building a life that I wanted, I built a life around, say, this is my career, and and to be honest with you, I wasn't, it was really good while I had it, but I always knew that there was something more I wanted to do. And until I actually had that pivot point, I didn't take the chance on it. And yeah, when I did, there was, giving up your career, so to speak. It's like, wow, like, what am I going to do if this new thing doesn't work out? So there's always that level of self-doubt. And just, there were moments when I look back, and, I was doing this thing, and I look back, and, even before I got on the plane to go to another country that's 10,000 kilometers away, I was like, what am I doing? I can't do this. What if I fail? There's always that question, like, what if I fail and I have to come back? And that was probably, just dealing with that was one of the most difficult things, And just to expand on that, one of my favorite books actually is by Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. And for listeners who maybe don't know, Viktor spent years in a Nazi concentration camp, Auschwitz being one of them, and just survived the most like unbelievable conditions ever. And he said, like, what kept him going and a few of the other prisoners was that they developed this attitude where everything can be taken from you except for one thing, the last of the human freedoms. And it's to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances. And that's what kept him alive. And meanwhile, a lot of other prisoners were just giving up. They'd accepted their fate, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They accepted their fate. They just died, from basically hopelessness. And I guess I'm trying to, connect that to, like, if you have a choice to make, if you have if you're put in a situation where you have to choose, you can either, you can control your attitude to make better choices or make the right choices, or if you wanted to do something, you can do it. I guess that's the point that I'm trying to make. You don't have to accept life as it is, and I think a lot of people do. I think they just fall into a rut, or they get busy with life. People get families and kids, and life just has a tendency to take over, and we just go with it, and we don't really slow down enough to think, hey, am I really doing what I want to do with my life? And I understand that, because I've been there a few times, and but I always go back to I love going back to this book, and just like some really powerful principles there that I think we can apply to our lives if we want to take our attitude and use it to create massive change. So.
Yeah, and I hear that phrase all the time. It is what it is, and I can't stand that phrase. I just cannot stand when people say, "Well, it is what it is." No, it's not. It definitely is not, and that's, you just pointed that out very clearly.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, one of the reminds me of one of the phrases I used to hear growing up. I'm sure you've heard this. Is times are tough. You have to take what you can get, and I always that just always sticks in my mind, because I like a lot of people believed it. Yeah, you have to take what you can get. And nowadays I'm like, no, I'm not taking what I can get. I'm not settling. I'm gonna figure out what I want, and then I'm gonna figure out how to get it. And so, there's a lot of those, I guess, phrases kicking around that, you hear them and you don't question them. They just seem so natural, because we grew up with them, or you heard it from somebody, or your friends were saying it, or, so.
Yeah, exactly. And so many people just jump on that bandwagon. So what is it that you're doing now, and why are you doing that?
Well, right now, I guess you could say I'm kind of leading a double life. I still have a full-time job, and I've got a family and 2 great kids, a girl 9, a boy 7. And I've actually been teaching for quite a long time, I guess, since I got here. And I've done a lot of, I mean, it's been great, like teaching in a foreign country. And I've worked at universities and schools, and I've had a lot of great success with it. I'm running a language school right now at the moment. I've been there for quite a while, but I had another one of those pivot points I'd say about 5, 6 years ago. I found myself just questioning what I'm doing again, because I've been doing it for so long, and I realized, I mentioned that one of the things I'd always wanted to do was write a book, and it was one of the things on my list, probably the top, I mentioned it was one of the top 3 things, actually. And for some reason, it was always one of those things where it was like, well, I'm going to do this someday, and it just became one of those someday things. But actually, it was one of those goals that I wanted today. And I guess, I just went through this period about 6, maybe 7 years ago where I was like, I have to do this thing because, it was just eating at me, It's like one of those things it's just unfinished, and I just started writing a book one day, and it was a personal development book. I spent about 2 years writing it. I stuck with it, week by week. By the time I was done, I think I had like this 120,000 word, 350 page monster of a book. And by the way, this was before Amazon had they were probably just getting going with their ebooks, their ebook platform, the KDP, but I was writing before that, and fiction as well. And I realized, since I was a kid, I was reading Stephen King and all kinds of books, and I knew, this is what I wanted to do. So anyway, I kept going with it, and finally, I guess a couple of years, I guess maybe 2 years ago, I finally self-published my first book. It didn't do very well because I'm actually quite, like a lot of authors, I'm quite introverted. So, marketing was not one of my strong points, and it still isn't at times. I still struggle with it. But I put my book out there, and nothing really happened. But, it's like, hey, I'm a published author now, woo, woo, woo. And, nothing really happened with it. And I was like, why not? And I realized, I guess I should be connecting with people, in the industry, and I should be doing this and that. And so I did. I started writing another book, and I actually joined a course. It's called SBS, a self-publishing school. Chandler Bolt created that just about a year and a half, or maybe almost 2 years now. I joined that course, and wow, I met some great people. And this was another one of those moments where, okay, I've been working as a language instructor for many years, and now suddenly I feel like I'm building this new career, I was working on another book at the time, actually 2 books at the same time, and within 90 days, I published another one. And that book did pretty good. It did a lot better, and I had people who were actually liking what I was writing, so that was cool. Because my first book, like I said, I think my mother bought a copy, and maybe somebody else, I don't know, and I had 0 reviews on it, so, I learned a lot of mistakes through that.
So why do you think your second book did better than your first? I have some ideas because of my experience in this arena, but what did you learn from that?
Yeah, good question. I connected with people. It was as simple as that. Like I said, I was very introverted. I wasn't really into any Facebook groups at the time, and this was a couple of years ago, and a lot's changed with the self-publishing in just 2 years, just the last year actually, but yeah, I got connected with a bunch of people who had similar goals. They were writing books too. I got, I hooked up with, an accountability partner. So somebody who, for the first time, I was actually talking about my writing with someone, which is something I'd never done really, So my first book, I spent years writing it. I never told anyone about it. It's like this. Mm-hmm. It's like this dirty little secret I was keeping under my bed, right? And it's amazing I actually got it published, yeah. And anyway, so that was probably it. I had a launch team, people who were willing to read it and maybe leave a review or two, and And I figured out, when you publish a book, you have to do these steps. I was like, wow, I never tried those steps before. And if you've never ever self-published a book, there's a real long list of things you have to know. And I realized, like, I didn't know anything, and that was good, because now I got the chance to, like, if I did this a second time, if I did this once and it succeeded, I can do it again, right? So I did. I wrote a third book, and again, did a lot. It did really well too. And again, every time I did this, like, I connected with different people, readers, other writers, people in the industry, bloggers, and I realized, like, to succeed, you can't make it on your own. And I think, like, for the longest time, I've always had the attitude that I've got to do this. I'm out there alone. I'm swimming in, swimming upriver and just by myself, and I'm going to do this thing. But really, you need someone to throw you a lifeline every now and then and help you out. So that was probably the biggest, I think, the biggest reasons that I kept going with it is I met some really great people, and relationships, I think that's what it comes down to, is you need people to support you, and you have to add value to people's lives in order to, to make it, I think. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, goodness, Scott, a lot of very, very valuable points there, and I just had a guest on the show recently, episode number 30 with Dave Chisan, and he points out that he's not a best author, but he's a best-selling author. And he's got Kindle books. That's one Men of Abundance. I know many of you are considering writing a book. You've got one in the back of your head. You've been maybe even put it down on paper or in your computer or whatever. But I encourage you to start learning from organizations like SPS or even Dave in episode 30, that because the launch, there's a lot of great books that are written out there that have hardly sold more than 10 copies, but it's because, like Scott was saying, he didn't have the network. And as I say many times over, your network is your net worth, and that's true with everything. And Scott learned a lot from SPS, and what is that, the self-publishing school, which I've also heard of quite a few times. And it's just having people who have been there and done what you want to do on your side and in your network makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. And Dave, just on he's got a great site there. I actually use it quite frequently because, like I said, marketing and selling books is something that, I myself and a lot of authors need a lot of help with. And he's got a lot of great posts on there. So, but yeah, definitely, like, if you're thinking about writing, publishing a book, get on board with somebody, don't try to go it alone, because you'll have so much more success if you hook up with a company or a self-publishing company or whatever it is. Even if you get a group of friends together and you decide, you're going to write a book together, just hold each other accountable for that.
Definitely. And all of that is talking about what we're getting ready to get into right now, which is paying it forward. You ready to pay it forward, Scott?
Sure.
All right. So give Men of Abundance 1 to 3 actionable steps that they can take today. Okay.
Well, yeah. I love waking up early in the morning. So I get up every morning about 5 a.m. And I think after I read Hal Elrod's The Miracle Morning, I thought, yeah, that sounds like a great system, and I tried it out, and I'm still waking up early. I like to get up early before the family, and what I'll do, actually, the key to that is that the night before, I will write down six action steps that I'm going to take the next day, and I think it's the Ivy Lee method, and it's great. I'll write down 6 things that I'm going to do the next day, and when you wake up, you just get to work on the first thing and prioritize them, work on each task until it's done. And whatever you don't finish, just move it to your list the next day. That's one thing. The second thing is what I call my morning power hour. Again, waking up early. I'll spend 10 minutes reading, exercise for 20 minutes, and then I'll spend the next hour writing until about 6:30. And by then, my family's up and I'm getting ready to start the day. So the last thing I'll put is I do a weekly review session every week, usually on a Sunday night. I'll take about 30 minutes set aside, and I'll just prioritize my goals for the week and work on strategies, and that's all I do. Like, I'll spend 30 minutes, maybe up to an hour, just working on the ideas for a blog post, outlining some chapters from my book, things like that. So the weekly review session is really important. So those are just three things there that I think Men of Abundance can try out. So
that last one I really like, in that you take one day a week to strategize things like your blog and your book and stuff like that. Men of Abundance, that's certainly something I feel that you can adopt, especially if you're working full time and you have other things that you want to work on. We don't have all the time in the world. We don't have all day long to do things, because once you got work, get home, help the kids with schoolwork or whatever, take them to the park, or any number of things we have going on in our lives. And I want you to live your life. That's the whole thing about Men of Abundance, is consistently moving forward, and as I say in the military, improving your foxhole, but also living your life. Don't put too much aside, because some of that stuff that you put aside won't be there very long, especially if you have young kids. So definitely a great actionable step I think you could take there. What daily habits make the biggest impact in your life, Scott?
Well, I'd say, I spend an hour a day writing, so I have a word count of 2,000 words a day. I don't always hit that word count. Some days, life just happens, but I'd say keeping that habit consistent. Staying healthy. I think, I used to love eating junk food and all kinds of stuff before bed, crap before bed. I wouldn't recommend that, so I just stick with fruits, veggies after 8 p.m. And that's a really great way to, when you wake up, you're just feeling refreshed, so, and the other thing is exercise, so I don't have a lot of time to the gym anymore, but there's a lot of stuff you can do at home. So like I said, I'll spend 20 minutes just doing some squats or push-ups or whatever, and I found like those 3 habits alone right there, it just makes a big difference in the day.
Excellent. Absolutely great habits. And I don't care much for the gym. Personally, I do most of my workouts at home, and that's how I prefer it. So what book would you recommend to our abundant leaders, and why?
So I mentioned a couple books already in the show, but actually the one book that I picked up earlier this year is Living Forward by Michael Hyatt and co-authored by Daniel Harkavy. This was just a great book, and again, like I mentioned, 20 years ago, I wrote out my goals and everything, and it changed everything, and I had kind of this like life plan going on, but it's not something that you can just do once and forget about it. It might get you to point B, but then somewhere's down the road, if you want to make a major change, you have to take it up a notch. And Living Forward, I read through the book and then went back and I started doing all the steps, and it's just a really great way to define the plan for your life. And I thought this was great because back in the school days, like most people, we have to take certain subjects in school, right? History or, mathematics, science, and they're all important, but, it'd be great if they had a course that was like Life Planning 101 or something like that, where, people could come out of school and they've already got some, great ideas what they want to do with their life. And, so I just think, like, as I was reading this book, I thought, this book should be like a course in school or something, so I'd really recommend it. It's a great book. Check it out if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to have that book and other books that we've already mentioned in the show notes with tags that you can click on that will take you directly to a specific point of interest within the show. And that's some really cool technology. So when you're in the show notes, you can click on the time tag. It'll take you directly to that portion of the show. So I have one more question for you, and that is, what does living a life of abundance mean to you?
Yeah, this is great. I thought about this actually all week, and I was thinking, throughout your life, I think like abundance means it changes as you move through life. Like, for example, when I was a kid, abundance meant having lots of toys. In my 20s, it meant abundance was how much I could drink and party on the weekends. In my 30s, it was about saving money and getting a house and all that. But now it means, for me, it's all about building freedom. I want more freedom in my life, and I think like living a life of abundance is having the freedom to do what you want to do. And I broke that down into 3 areas. So the first thing is doing the work you love. And the second one is doing it with the people you love and being surrounded by people who empower you. And the third thing is doing these things so that you can enjoy the things you love. Like I mentioned, I love traveling, and I used to do a lot of scuba diving. And these days I'm not doing as much of that because I'm really busy with a full-time job that I'm hopefully, eventually someday my writing will take over, and that will be my full-time job. So that's the dream point. But right now, abundance is it's just working towards building more freedom into my lifestyle. Or making freedom my lifestyle, I should say.
Absolutely, and you bring up a very good point, and I believe that's the first time somebody has brought that up on the show, is that, and other than maybe myself, is that living a life of abundance is whatever it means to you, but you add it on at whatever point you are in your life. That's what this show is about, is to help you live your life of abundance, and then further celebrate those and highlight those and bring those that are living their life of abundance onto the show. Because as you may have noticed, abundant leaders, I don't always have top influencers on my show. While they are great to listen to and great to talk to and a lot to learn from, I feel there's just as much to learn from other people who are not those famous influencers that everybody knows. That's why I like talking with other people who maybe aren't out there, putting themselves out there as much as other people are, because I just love hearing those stories, and I love sharing those stories with you. So, Scott, I definitely enjoy talking with you and hearing your story and how you just up and left and been living in Japan for 20 years and have a beautiful family and kids and doing things you want to be doing.
Well, thank you, and thanks for having me here.
Excellent. So we're going to close this up, and before we do, I'd love for you to leave us with a parting piece of guidance and any way that we can reach you or follow what it is that you're excited about these days.
Okay, sure. Well, I guess I would say the first thing is don't be afraid to fail. I've written about this a lot in some of my books, because that's always something that held me back. Don't be afraid to fail, because life's going to pass you by regardless whether you take action or not. So second thing is pay now so you can play later. And I guess that means just doing what you have to do now, giving up what you have to give up now so you can enjoy your life down the road. I mean, you can still enjoy it now, but, just whatever it is that you need to give up for now to accomplish your goals, your dream, whether it be, giving up TV for 6 months or a year, or video games or whatever it is, just do that. And the other one is, I think I mentioned already, is don't settle for what you can get, because I think life is just full of abundance. Look around you. There's so much that we can not just get, but we can give. And I think like abundance is not just getting stuff, but giving so much back to people. And I guess the one more point I'll make is, make a difference in your work and your life. Try to help people out, even if it's just one person. It's worth it. So that's my parting piece of guidance. And if you want to reach me, I do have a blog at www.scottallanSite.com, where I post regularly. And if you jump over to Amazon, go to the book section and just type in Scott Allan, you'll find my books there. But I can also send you the links as well, and you can put those in the show notes. So
yeah, absolutely. Please do that. And Scott, you are definitely a man of abundance. I'm so honored to have had you on the show, and I know Men of Abundance has gotten a lot out of this conversation. I appreciate you, man.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me. It's been great.
My pleasure. Take care.
Okay, you too.
There you have it, Men of Abundance, another amazing conversation with a very abundant leader. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did, and if you did, be abundant in your life today and share this episode and share Men of Abundance with everyone in your community. And I would greatly appreciate it if you would leave a rating and review on whatever platform it is that you're listening to this on, even if it's on the website. If you're listening to this episode on menofabundance.com, you can leave a comment right below the show notes. And if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, please leave us a rating and review right there on that platform. All right, make this an amazing week. Go out and live your life of abundance, and be sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.